Hi, I'm Mackenzi Lee, this is Queenie, and we're here to bring you more recommendations from my bookstore to your bookshelves. So in addition to being a bookseller, I'm also an author. I'm the author of The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue and its sequel, The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy, coming on October 2nd, available for pre-order wherever books are sold, and self-promotion. So I hear from a lot of people about these books, and generally the reviews and emails and fan encounters that I have are prefaced by the phrase, I don't usually read historical fiction, but, which is sad, because historical fiction is really the best of all genres, in my humble opinion. So today, in my video, I'm going to be combating some of the most common things I hear about why people don't like historical fiction with a book recommendation that will prove you wrong. First thing I hear from people is, I don't like historical fiction because it's boring. First of all, historical fiction is not boring because history is not boring. History is so weird and crazy, and there are so many things that you didn't know existed that when you read about, you'll be like, what? I didn't know it existed, that seems fake, it's so cool. So if you would like to read about one of these lesser known historical phenomenons that will totally blow your mind, and also a book that's really exciting and really interesting, I would recommend Devil in the Marshalsea by Antonia Hodgson. It's not technically a YA book, but it's really fun, it reads really fast, it's very commercial, and I think if you are a YA reader, you would really like this book. This book is about a gentleman named Thomas Hawkins, and he is a fallen gentleman in that he had a fortune that he sort of gave up and squandered away and is now like a gambling degenerate person in London in the 1700s. Because of his gambling degenerateness, he gets thrown in the debtor's prison called the Marshalsea. I did not know about what the Marshalsea was before I read this book, and I had to keep Googling facts about it, even though the book starts with an author's note that's like, this place was real and all the details are real, even if the story is not. So the Marshalsea was a debtor's prison, but it was also like sort of like a weird hotel, that there were like restaurants and shops and people in the prison like ran these restaurant and shops, but also they were in debt, but also you had to pay rent to live there. And so because of that, there was like a hierarchical system of who was like most important, and also there was lots of corruption and bribery and just like, it's bananas. And also you could like kind of leave sometimes. It's crazy. The Marshalsea was so gross and weird, like everything else in 1700s England, and it was so fascinating to read a book set there. On top of which, as soon as Thomas arrives in the Marshalsea, somebody is murdered, dun dun dun, and then the book becomes sort of like an Agatha Christie-esque closed-door mystery, because obviously if somebody's murdered in a prison, it has to be somebody in the prison who did it. I love this book. It's so funny. Thomas is like a very self-deprecating narrator, and I really, really enjoy the narrative voice of this book. Also, the mystery is so interesting and so freaking compelling, and I just love this book and its sequel, which is called The Last Confession of Thomas Hawkins, also a murder mystery. So if you would like to read about a very interesting and very weird historical thing that you probably didn't know about, and also prove yourself wrong that historical fiction is not boring, please read The Devil in the Marshalsea by Antonia Hodgson. So you might say to yourself, I can't really relate to most historical fiction. It's just, you know, characters living in such a different world that they don't have any problems I can relate to, and I don't see myself in these books. So if that is your issue with historical fiction, you might want to try Drift and Dagger by Kendall Kulper. So this book is set in a alternate 1800s. It is about a boy named Mal who lives in this world where everybody is sort of magical, and magic is just sort of an underlying current of his world, and he is immune to magic, which makes him kind of a freak and an outcast. And so he doesn't tell anybody about this except his best friend, who is a witch, and of course she betrays him. Dun, dun, dun. So she betrays him and tells his secret, and then he gets sort of like shamed off his island, and it's sad, and he's sad and wants revenge. And so he ends up teaming up with this guy who is sort of a magical treasure hunter. So they find dangerous magical objects, and then because Mal is immune to magic, he can touch them and handle them in ways other people can't. So they steal these magical objects and then they resell them. Pretty shady, but it makes for a good adventure novel. So Mal hears about this object called the Shar, which is a dagger that will suck the magic out of anybody that comes in contact with it, and he's like, rad, I'm gonna use that to get revenge on the girl that ruined my life. So Mal and his partner go searching for the Shar. Of course, things don't go according to plan, and they end up traveling all over the world, and so you get this really great global adventure novel. There's also other people looking for the items, so they're kind of in this like race with them, because of course they are. But why I found this book so relatable is because sort of an underlying current of this whole book is that it's a book about depression. Mal is a character who doesn't really like himself for a lot of reasons. Both things that stem from his like lack of magical abilities, and also things that just stem from like a chemical predisposition to be depressed. I love that this is a book about depression without really being a book about depression. Depression is just part of Mal's life. It's not really something that's ever given a name or a word. It's just so present in his character. He's really self-deprecating, he's really snarky, he's really funny, but he also has a lot of issues and really hates himself and has really low self-esteem, and you just want to give him a hug. But also, it's something he has to learn to live with, and throughout the novel, that's kind of what he does. And it's super great, and I just love this book. Please read Drift and Dagger and its sequel slash first book slash companion, Salt and Storm by Kendall Kulper. So if you ever think to yourself, I don't like historical fiction because it's so serious, that's fair. Lots of historical fiction is about Hitler, and it's hard to be funny about Hitler. But if you're looking for some funny historical fiction, I would recommend Palace of Spies by Sarah Zettel. Palace of Spies had me laughing out loud from page one because it is so voicey, and the narrator, her name is Peg, is so like spunky and feisty and resilient and resourceful, and I just freaking love her. She's one of my favorite ladies in literature. So Peg has been raised by her aunt and uncle, who throw her out of the house when she refuses to marry a guy that sexually assaulted her. Team Peg. She ends up being sort of recruited slash sucked into this spy ring that operates within the British court, and she becomes one of the handmaidens to the Queen in order to gather information about the mysterious death of one of the other handmaids who was working for this spy ring before Peg. So this becomes like a courtly intrigue book. It's a spy novel. There's like political thriller antics stuff, all set in the English court and all its courtly weirdness, which is pretty fun. I love that this book is a book about relationships between women, both Peg and the other handmaids, and then Peg, and she has a cousin that she's like super close to, and about their relationship and how it is sustained after she leaves their house and is doing the secret work she can't tell her cousin about. This book is lovely, and it's so funny. It had me laughing out loud, like I said, from page one, and just, I wish I'd written this book. Like, it's so funny and so voicey, and I just love it. That's Palace of Spies by Sarah Zettel. If you think to yourself, all historical fiction is about straight people, which is why I don't like it, that's fair. There's a lot of historical fiction about straight people. However, there is a whole anthology of historical fiction, short stories, not about straight people. Full disclosure, I have a story in this anthology. That being said, I freaking loved every story in this anthology. Like, I enjoyed reading this so much as like a reader and a contributor. That anthology is called All Out, and it's edited by Sandra Mitchell. It features stories by many of your favorite YA authors like Melinda Lowe and Anna Marie McElmore and Sean David Hutchinson and Elliot Wake. And it's great. It's all about queer people through history. There's stories about magician's assistants and transgender Robin Hood. Guys, this anthology is so fun and so great, and basically just like Hulk smashes the idea that history is only for straight people. That's All Out, which is an anthology edited by Sandra Mitchell. You also might think to yourself, I don't like historical fiction because it's all about white people. Yeah, that one's pretty fair too. We white people need to stop taking up so much space in historical fiction. However, if you would like to read historical fiction that is not about white people, might I recommend Outrun the Moon by Stacey Lee, slash everything I've ever read that Stacey Lee has written, because they are all great. So Outrun the Moon is about a girl named Mercy, I think. We're gonna go with Mercy. That's what my gut is telling me. She's living in turn-of-the-century America in Chinatown in San Francisco. It's kind of rough being a Chinese person in San Francisco in the turn of the century because racism is the worst. But Mercy is very resilient, and she's very persistent, and she wants to be a businesswoman, and she wants to be taken seriously. And so she sort of sweet talks her way into this girls' school where she is the only Chinese girl. She's the only not white girl, and then has to kind of tell some elaborate lies in order to keep her position there. And right as her scheme is about to be uncovered, the San Francisco earthquake happens, and the whole town is devastated, and suddenly this school of girls who think they really don't have anything in common have to come together to survive. It becomes sort of a survival tale centered around the relationships between these women who come from all different places, and Mercy is just like the loveliest narrator. You just want to spend so much time with her because she's just like, every time she gets knocked down, she just like bounces right back up. Like, it's a book about a person of color, but the main issue does not have to do with like racism or race. Like, Mercy's got other things going on in her life, but at the same time, like, it doesn't shy away from the real realities of racism in early America. I love this book. I love Stacey Lee. She also wrote a book called Under a Painted Sky, which is about a Chinese girl and a black girl in the American West. Basically, you should read everything she writes, and that is Outrun the Moon by Stacey Lee. You also might think to yourself, I don't like historical fiction because there's no women in it. Yeah, historical fiction sucks at including women sometimes. However, if you would like a book that involves girls kicking literal and figurative ass, you might want to try The Fair Fight by Anna Freeman. This is also technically an adult book, but it read very YA to me. Like it felt, the characters are like young, and I don't know, I think this book has a lot of crossover, trust me. So The Fair Fight is about two young women in Georgia and England. One of them is sort of upper crust rich girl, but is sort of shunned by society because she has pox scars all over her face. And then the other woman is born very poor. She's born into a brothel, basically can't get a leg up in life until both of them discover bare knuckle boxing. So this is a real thing that was going on in Georgia and England with these leagues of all female bare knuckle boxers. It was sort of like the 1700s equivalent of roller derby. And so both of these women become bare knuckle boxers. They meet, their lives sort of intersect, and they end up smashing the patriarchy, among other literal smashing. I loved this book. It also has a third narrator in it who is, I don't want to say he's queer because you can read it a couple different ways, but it definitely explores sort of like the romantic, capital R romantic friendship between men in the 1700s. I loved this book because I didn't know anything about female bare knuckle boxing in Georgia and England going into it, and I learned a lot, and it made me Google a lot. And then also, I love that it's a book where the characters feel like women from their time, but that doesn't mean they're not like smart and strong and capable and super feminist, and they're not about to put up with any BS from the dudes in their lives. So that's The Fair Fight by Anna Freeman. So if you have historical fiction recommendations for me, if you have specific pet peeves about historical fiction that you would like me to help you quash, please talk to me in the comments. I would love to answer and talk to you about books because that's what I love to do. As always, don't forget to subscribe to Epic Reads on YouTube. You can also follow me on Instagram, where there's a lot of puppy content going on right now, and Twitter at the Mackenzi Lee. Until next time. I don't know why I said that like a 1920s news anchor.